Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Panu Miettinen, and I welcome you all to our panel discussion about the future of vertical farming. And this event is a part of Aalto University's Design for a Cooler Planet Festival, which runs for another week. So you can check it out on Aalto websites. And I will be hosting this event with Itta Kotilainen from Luke. So a couple of words about myself first. So I have been involved in the technology development in the field of vertical farming for the last 5 years. And it's been quite a ride. When I started, vertical farming was still kind of a niche market that was quite unfamiliar to most of the people. But now it's really moving towards a globally recognized solution for our food crisis. And I have been involved in different projects at Aalto University and Luke, and I am also a co-founder in Vacuum Insulation Solutions, which is a startup that focuses on building the most sustainable and efficient vertical farming buildings. So before I let Titta talk, there is a couple of words about today's program. So we will start off by listening to 6 presentations, and they come from different experts on the field. And after the presentations, we will have a panel discussion here with 4 panelists, and me and Titta will be moderating. So yeah, I welcome you all again, and I hope you enjoy this event.
All right. So I will start today's presentations by giving you an introduction, very short, what we are talking about here today. So very briefly, because beloved child has many names. You can call it controlled environment agriculture, vertical farming, plant factories with artificial lighting, etc., etc. So in short, our topic today is growing plants, food in controlled conditions where usually there's no sunlight involved. So the whole technological development of vertical farming has been made possible by the advancement of LED lights. So like 20 years ago with greenhouses, you had only available these high-sodium lights that you can't use very close to the plants. Hence, it's not practical to design a closed environment where plants are stacked on shelves or on top of another with those kind of lighting fixtures. But with LEDs, the situation is really different. So despite the many names, we sum up everything under vertical farming here today. So now I will briefly introduce some of our research projects that I'm involved in at our research institute, Natural Resources Institute Finland. There are many more that I didn't include here, so that but to give you a brief introduction. So we'll start with the research facility that is located in Kajaani in northern Finland. It's built in the premises of Kainuu Vocational College, and the aim is to study this and develop year-round energy efficient and economically profitable horticultural production in northern Finland, because Kajaani is so north that basically that's the in terms of viability, it's no point building greenhouses anymore northern in Finland. It would take just too much energy to warm them up during the winter. But this type of vertical farming, of course, it works anywhere. So there have been a lot of experiments with different types of plants, and just as an example to mention seedlings. A lot of seedlings that are grown then to full-grown plants here in Finland in open field production, like strawberries or cabbage, etc. Those seedlings come from, for example, from Poland and the Netherlands, and there have been questions that what if we could more and more grow those seedlings indoors here in Finland, because there's always the problem of plant diseases traveling with the seedlings, etc., etc. And of course, the energy consumption side of things, that's a big part of what's been examined in that facility, and we will hear a lot about energy issues later on today. So, and Panu mentioned this vacuum insulation system, and we have this pilot facility at our institute, research station in Piikkiö near Turku, and that has been used already to grow lettuce, and we will continue working in that vertical farming research facility later on this autumn. And then we have this what we call cucumber factory, because as you will learn during today, most of the plants nowadays grown in vertical farming environments are like small plants. You imagine lettuces and herbs in pots. And then my colleagues already years ago started to think that because cucumbers, when they grow in greenhouses, they can be something like 4 or 5 meters tall, and usually they only have the top light just there on the top. That what about the leaves lower on the plant, that how much light reaches those leaves, and what about the photosynthesis of those leaves below? So they put the cucumber plants sideways and put the lights there to study photosynthesis. But then some years later, they started to think that, actually this idea might work in this vertical farming concept. Hence, now there's a patent accepted. We have grown cucumbers, pole beans, and hops quite successfully in this type of system, and there's a business model in development. And like I said, we will talk a lot about energy and electricity prices today. And just to mention experiments that we've been doing in this Food Without Fields project is that if you take the electricity price and adjust your lighting regime according to those electricity prices, of course, in a way it's straightforward. You can control and program your lights to do that. But the lettuces didn't like that. They actually really didn't like that. We disturbed their circadian rhythm so much that we are continuing now with experiments. Also, one of our speakers, Arttu Mäkinen, will tell you about this type of experiment just after me, that what one needs to do to sort of smooth the transitions, what can we do to make the plants sort of accept that electricity prices vary a lot, so that the lighting regimes might vary a lot. And then just last, I want to mention this Digitonttu project that has been going on in the Närpiö region in Finland. It hasn't been strictly about vertical farming, but greenhouse production, but the concept that has been developed there, and also of course elsewhere, what I like to promote in our research is that the plants would tell us what they need, because usually the climate control programs that control the climate in greenhouses and vertical farms, they measure air temperature or air humidity or something like that. But what about if it would measure leaf temperature? And in this case, where the pictures sap flow in tomato stems, that what if the climate control would be steered from the plant perspective? So that's the sort of one big thing that we keep in mind with our project, that how to get towards the situation that the plants would tell what they need. And that gives me a perfect way to introduce our next speaker, Arttu Mäkinen, a PhD student from University of Helsinki, and he has this similar approach in his studies. So please, Arttu, if you can.
I think Arttu needed it. Just a minute for the online audience. We're changing laptops.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Arttu Mäkinen. I'm a PhD student in the doctoral program of plant science at the University of Helsinki. And in this presentation, I'm going to give a brief overview of the things I'm studying in my PhD project. And the title of the thesis is Dynamic Control Strategies of Artificial Light in Vertical Farming, in which I aim to find the goal of the thesis is to find the balance between the use of electricity consumption and crop productivity. And as many of you know, or all of you know, the erratic fluctuations of electricity price has been on the news recently, and this year it's been quite dramatic changes throughout the summer and throughout the year. And here's few news articles from the Finnish newspaper Helsinki Sanomat. Apologies that they're in Finnish, but I'll try to translate them into English as much as possible. So there have been some practical applications for households which can be used to alleviate these kind of like drastic fluctuations in electricity price by utilizing control systems which can allocate electricity consumption into hours of the day in which the electricity price is lower. And yeah, this is the household perspective, but in terms of commercial greenhouse production and plant production in general, the order of magnitude in greenhouse production is significantly larger. The electricity consumption is measured in megawatt hours instead of kilowatt hours. And in northern latitudes, in greenhouse production is quite volatile and subjective to fluctuation in available solar light. There can be too much or there can be too little. To alleviate this, the farmers use supplemental lights. And traditionally that has been HBS lights, which you can see in the picture below. Vertical farming, on the other hand, is a type of cultivation technique where the system as a whole is highly optimized and enclosed from the natural elements, and is functioning independently of natural light. In these types of systems, the use of artificial light typically covers 70 to 80% of electricity consumption or costs, and 20 to 30% of overall production costs. So the use of artificial light / electricity is directly influencing the production efficiency of these highly advanced indoor cultivation systems. And let's look at the traditional or conventional way of like how greenhouse farmers are organizing their or like managing their lighting strategies in the high latitudes. So here you can see a diagram of sunlight intensity changing throughout the day. It's quite a small font, but on the bottom there's x-axis, which is like 24-hour cycle of the day, and on the y-axis there's the light intensity. So there's like daily changes in light intensity as the sun is transitioning past the sky. But there can also be changes in the weather, for example, cloud cover or seasonal changes, where this graph would be, or the line would be totally flat. There would be no light, natural light at all. So what the growers do is they use supplemental light. They use HBS lights, which can be switched on or off. So there's not much really control over how much light they can provide to the plants, apart from switching them on or off. And when you look at the changes in the electricity price throughout the day, here's the electricity price curve is calculated using Nord Pool data from the years 2020 and 2021. It's calculated average between every day and every single hourly data from these years. So it should be relatively robust. It's not taking into consideration the recent years and changes in like dramatic fluctuations. but it could be should be quite robust. On the other hand, in vertical farming, where you're not dependent on solar light, you can organize these lighting regimes differently. By using LED technology, you can dim the lights quite easily, and they can be dimmed from 10% to 100%. So using that technique, you could organize or develop a lighting strategy which would change the light intensity, for example, have a high peak in the middle of the night and then lower the light intensity as the electricity price starts to increase in the morning. Or you could have it the opposite way of starting out with a low light intensity and switching up into a higher intensity towards the night. These lighting strategies should be or can be organized so that the plants get sufficient amount of light in order to grow and develop into mature plants. So the main objectives of my PhD project is to design and construct a small-scale vertical farming system, which can be or equipped with these kind of adjustable LED lights, and use the system to investigate different photobiological responses in plants under these alternative lighting regime conditions. We are using a translational approach, which means that we are trying to transfer knowledge and insights gained from basic biological studies into more relevant and important food crop species. In these studies, we're starting out with basic lettuce and kale, and in the future, we hope to use some other interesting species as well. We're also observing their growth, yield, and nutritional value, which are key components of plant production for food purposes in this context. So, and we're also employing a applied approach, meaning that we aim to develop alternative lighting strategies for commercial use, especially in vertical farming. So the first objective is actually quite well underway already. I have put a small-scale system up at the University of Helsinki facilities, and the name Välke comes from a Finnish acronym Valon ja sähköenergian älykäs käyttö kerrosviljelyssä, which roughly translates to intelligent use of artificial light and electricity in vertical farming. The system is constructed within a walk-in growth chamber room with controlled conditions for air temperature and relative humidity. It is also equipped with a programmable LED control system, which enables me to control the photo period or the day length, light intensity levels within that photo period, and also introduce some light fluctuations if I want to. We also aim to study, we aim to study and investigate the effects of these alternative lighting regimes, but also try out different cultivation methods, for example, hydroponics and aeroponics. And we also have access to different light spectra, and we can swap out different lamps for the system if we please to. So here's a closer look of the system. You can see 4 compartments on 4 shelves, which are separated by these reflective sheets, which help block out the light, but also greatly enhance the light distribution within each chamber. And on each shelf, there's one single LED lamp installed. And next, here's a diagram of how the system is being controlled and how it's connected together. So on the bottom, you see the same shelves as in the earlier picture, and each of the LED light is connected into its separate dimmer. And those dimmers are controlled by an access point, which in turn is connected to the internet and can be controlled and programmed by a mobile app on your phone or on a browser dashboard. And what I've come up with for treatments of this thing is we're starting out with 4 different lighting regime treatments. The one on the left top is this control treatment, which corresponds to a typical lighting regime, which is used in commercial greenhouse production or vertical farming. The lights are switched on roughly in the morning, and they remain on at the fixed light intensity throughout the day, typically between like 16 to 18 hours each day. The one on the right aims to mimic the light intensity changes that occur in a natural outdoor lighting environment. And the two on the bottom can be used to investigate the effects of like this. What if the light intensity peak starts out early in the morning and then smooths out throughout the day, or vice versa, starts out with a low intensity and then ends with a high intensity. This can be this can influence a wide variety of like qualitative attributes of the plants, but also like general growth. And all of these lighting treatments have the same amount of light. So the term for that in horticultural setting is called DLI, which is daily light integral. Some preliminary experiments show that there were no significant differences in fresh weight in lettuce between these treatments, which in this context is a good thing. So, which means that we can possibly use these to save some electricity, and but we need to make some more thorough experiments to confirm these results. We have also yet to delve deeper into the qualitative aspects of this, but that will come at a later date. And based on the same Nord Pool data I showed you earlier in the previous graphs, I estimated that it could be possible to save up to 20 or 30% costs in electricity with these kind of regimes compared to the control treatment. So to conclude, it's about finding a balance between these two things. So LED can be used to achieve dynamic control of the light in a variety of ways. For example, you can easily adjust the duration of the day length, but also the quality of the light, the spectrum, and also most importantly, the quantity and the brightness or the intensity throughout the day is also able to manipulate. And these terms are essential in meeting the needs of the plant throughout its growth stages. But also it has interesting opportunities for optimizing the electricity consumption in these kind of systems. And in my PhD project, I aim to overlap these aspects and find some practical solutions in terms of intelligent light use. Thank you. Here's some acknowledgements go to my research group and also Maiju and Yrjö Rikolan Puutarhan Säätiö, which are sponsoring the studies for the next year of my studies. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a really interesting presentation, and it sounds like 30% savings in electricity cost is quite a lot these days. And just to note the audience, we will take questions at the end of the panel. So if you have a specific question in mind, please write it down in the chat or somewhere else, and we can then take them at one part in the end section. And so our next speaker is the CEO of NetLed, Niko Kivioja. So I will put up the laptop and let you present. Sure.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I believe most of you already know what NetLed is, but briefly, we are a Pirkanmaa-based technology company, and we build and offer turnkey vertical farming systems for mass producers of vegetables. And we've built about 10 vertical farms so far, and the biggest one we just commissioned this summer in Sweden, in Söderfors, where we have 2.7 million heads of herbs annually produced in that facility, and that is being marketed. Those crops are being marketed with ICA, which is the local Kesko group. with their own private label brand. So that is the biggest project we've done so far. So, but that's Nedlet in brief. I was asked to give a little, let's say, outlook or introduction to how we see the overall vertical farming market right now from technology point of view, but also from the actual value chain point of view. So if you think about the value chain, it comes from both the actual produce, the leafy greens, the herbs, mainly nowadays. Of course, there's a lot of new crops being studied, but the majority of vertical farms are nowadays leafy greens and herbs. So that is the value of that vertical farm end product market, but also the technology market where we are active at the time. So first few notes we've come up with quite recently, actually. Indoor vertical farming has a big role in sustainable agriculture, printed by Forbes in February. Does it really? It probably plays a part, but of course it's still quite difficult to see that, let's say, bulk commodity food products being grown in vertical farms. It's awfully expensive to build that sort of infrastructure to actually grow high nutritional value crops in vertical farms. And that's the main reason why we're starting with leafy greens, because of the low calorie content, which makes it cost efficient to produce in vertical farms. Does it happen ever? I believe that we are moving towards that, but it is still difficult to see how long it will take to actually produce high nutritional value crops in vertical farms. But having said that, there is significance in vertical farming development on the global scale, I believe. Vertical farms expand as demand for year-round produce grows. New York Times. There's not too much about that. Then the rise of vertical farms, could indoor plant factories be the norm in 10 years? Guardian printed notion. I think that 10 years is probably too short period of time to actually see that all CEA would be indoor vertical farms. But I think that we will see rapid growth in this anyways. Cucumber capital growers selling up as Brexit and energy crisis hit Britain's vegetable industry. This is actually pretty new, only about a month old news, that because of Brexit and because of this gas prices and everything, in Britain they are cutting down 60 hectares of cucumber production. And if year-round greenhouse hectares we have about 140 hectares in all of Finland year-round production, and Britain is cutting 60 hectares down. That's huge amount of production. But if it doesn't make financial sense, then it just doesn't make financial sense. And this is pretty interesting news, came up a week ago. BlackRock and Nasdaq announcement that BlackRock is saying that best sectors to invest during inflationary times, so these, let's say, very volatile times for any investments, and they are mentioning agricultural technology. So they really believe that we are going to need to put a lot of money into this development of technology and seeing the ways to actually produce certain crops in future. Well, then to few, let's say, arguments why vertical farming makes sense. And one is this: how to prevent global warming by reducing emissions. So preventing global warming, I think it's naive to say that we can prevent it. It's already happened, and it's very difficult to actually backtrack on that one. But I think the more important thing and more important arguments right now is how to preserve food production capabilities in water scarce areas. So we see all these notions of droughts. We take a look at that later on, but that is one big thing. And the second big thing is, since we are already in the middle of climate change, how can we actually produce the crops with this changing environment? It is getting awfully difficult in certain and a lot of areas actually to grow in greenhouses, even because of the solar intensity, and the temperatures are just way too high, and the cost for cooling down that greenhouse is getting very difficult. So I think what we need to collaboratively, even this Finnish, let's say, community of vertical farmers and technology companies needs to focus on how we can actually produce food with this changing environment, and approve or accept the facts that we are already in the middle of this crisis. Well, if we go to market drivers, and this is what I said about the how to produce crops in water scarce areas. And here you see two maps, one is Europe, one is US, and where we have exceptional droughts this year. Like Lake Mead, which is feeding the water for 80 million people, and the water level was dropping in the midsummer about 1.5–2 meters per week. So it was awful situation. A lot of people were really scared about what's going to happen. And this means that actually a lot of field areas are idled. So you cannot grow in those field areas because there's no water available to grow there. So this is definitely one of the biggest drivers, how to grow crops in these areas where you just cannot have the water that you need for growing. And if you're on open field, the worst case scenario, you may need to put even 250 liters per kilogram of lettuce production. In greenhouse, state-of-the-art Finnish greenhouse, you need 36 liters per kilogram. In vertical farms, you can go down to 1.5–2 liters per kilogram. So it is very difficult, even with greenhouses, to operate on these areas that you just don't have the water available. And FAO stated that the production of grains have dropped so significantly that it means that 111 million people around the world are eating less bread because of this lack of grains for baking. So we are actually facing pretty serious crisis right now, even though the water levels are a little bit recovering because we are going towards winter, but it's only temporary, and next year we are probably facing same or even worse situations. And from NASA reports, we see that in 2070 we are actually, these are the areas where we cannot produce corn anymore in 2070, and corn is one of the biggest cereals or grains being produced. So if we go to market drivers, what are driving the vertical farming market? Global warming, of course, that's the clear answer. Shortage of fresh water, these are probably two most significant ones. And I think this energy discussion is of course important for Nordic areas and northern production areas, but then again, the water issue is much bigger globally than the energy issue. Climbing energy prices, of course, this is more of a Nordic thing, but also in Central Europe, the greenhouses are struggling with these energy prices right now. So it's affecting the northern areas, but also the southern areas where you need to use a lot of energy for cooling, and that is also problematic because of these energy prices. Shortage of fuels may be an issue, but that's more clearly seeing at the energy price rise right now. Pest problems, climate change, we have milder winters. It's not so easy to disinfect greenhouses anymore because we cannot just let the frost come in and kill the pests, but now we just need to use more chemicals or some other means to disinfect the greenhouses, even here in North. Food safety issues, food mileage, and greenhouses have significant problems in adapting to this climate change because you need to cool them down, and when you have 1,000 watts per square meter solar radiation, it's awfully difficult to cool down that amount of energy coming in. Well, if we take a look at the numbers, the overall working in food market is rewarding. Maybe that's not the right word, but anyways, it's the biggest commodity market in the world. Of course, everybody must eat, but there's a lot of things we don't have to do necessarily, but eating is a must. 8 to 11 trillion US dollars. It's a lot of money, but also a lot of food. Well, vegetable market is about 1% 10% of the overall global food market. But it is actually growing 1% unit faster than the overall food market, which is actually indicating that we are increasing our vegetable eating over other food segments, which is of course good thing. And then if we take a look at overall indoor farming technology market, CEA market, it's about $14.5 billion and growing fast, about 9.4% annually. Well, if we go in the numbers of vertical farming itself, so CEA is all the greenhouses and all, let's say, a little bit higher technology growing. In vertical farming side, the growth rate is 25%. So if we compare the vertical farm market growth to CEA market growth, we are actually growing many times faster in vertical farming field. And what this indicates is that vertical farm is actually cannibalizing the CEA market or greenhouse market. It's not extending the market, but cannibalizing the existing ways of production. And as long as it's done smartly and we are actually achieving these climate goals and these water saving goals, it is a very good thing. But of course, vertical farming can mean a lot of things, but still I believe that the direction is right. Currently $4.5 billion, expected to grow $33 billion by 2030. So there's a lot of room, and this is extremely fast growing global market, 25%, meaning that there's a lot of room to do business here, and that's why I'm happy to see that we have a lot of people interested about this field. And I also believe that because we are the northernmost agricultural country in the world, so we have something that other areas or competing areas don't necessarily have, the mindset of understanding the difficulties of farming, and this way I believe that we have a lot to give to this market in Finland. And lastly, how we see that the overall vertical farming market is developing right now. So I believe that we are actually moving from this emerging market, let's say, model to this more developing market model. Emerging market means that we have pioneers who have invested, well, some areas a little smaller amounts of money, and some areas are huge amounts of money in this pioneer endeavors of vertical farms. If we look at these big names in the business in US, for example, Air Farms, Bovary, Infarms, German, plenty. So they are farmers with self-made technology, and this is very typical when there is no technology companies available to give you tested, verified technology. Then you have to build the technology yourself, and then they are serving the retailers. Developing market, which I believe that we are heading towards or already there, means that there are technology suppliers like Netled, and then there's farmers that are buying the technology and serving the retailers, the end clients. And then when we are moving towards commodity market, assuming that the whole market is developing as the greenhouse market originally developed, we are heading towards an arrangement where there's technology suppliers, farm owners, and separate operating companies and end clients. And separate operators and farm owners means that the farm owners are funds or private equity or not necessarily banks, but private equity most likely. And the operators are offering all that manual work and all those buying stuff and selling stuff from the farm and guaranteeing the farm owners have the return of investment, but then again the operators are doing the heavy lifting and bearing the risks of the operation itself. And this is the model that the big greenhouse operations in North America, for example, are working, that the farm owners are not doing anything. They are just taking the cream out of the cake, and then the operators are doing the heavy lifting for those operations. But then beyond food, what can we grow in future? What market, where can this market actually expand? Because those numbers we looked at are only food related markets. Well, we had tree seedlings. This is something that have been done in vertical farms already. It's quite interesting because the forestation operations are growing and increasing rapidly. We have beauty industry extracts. We see a pilot projects already in this side, which is pretty interesting. Medical extracts, also the legal ones, and flowers. This is already done vertical farm way. But I believe that one of the biggest thing is going to be animal fodder, cattle feed. And why is that? Because it's $73 billion industry, which is 4 or 5 times larger industry than CEA altogether right now. And even though if we see that vegetable eating is growing, and we all want to see that more and more people are eating vegetables instead of meat, but the fact is that there will always be people willing to pay for meat. It doesn't matter how expensive it is. And then there's also market going to be for the animal fodder. And this is how vertical farming can actually influence the protein supply chain instead of just carbohydrates and these vegetables. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nico. And our next speaker is Juuso Määttä, Technology Manager from Pinoa Foods.
All right, my name is Juuso Määttä. I'm the Technology Manager at Pinoa Foods. We are part of the category of farmers that have their self-made technology. As noted earlier, we are a producer farm here in Espoo area, and I'm going to talk about microgreen vertical farming today. But first, about Pinoa Foods. Netlet might be really familiar for you, but Pinoa Foods might be a little bit unknown. So we are a vertical farm here in Espoo area, originally in Helsinki, in Vallila. Founded in 2018, we initially provided microgreens for restaurants, around 20 to 30 different varieties. But 2020, we had to make some adjustments for obvious reasons, and then we piloted to consumer business, which is currently where our business is mainly focused. We have few technology projects ourselves, but currently we are providing microgreens nationwide. Perhaps you have seen our produce in K-markets or Prismas. We provide all the way from Helsinki to Rovaniemi here in Finland. Our main products are pea microgreens, sunflower, radish, and mix of baby leaves. And now we are launching also broccoli and rucola microgreens. But as noted, we have developed our own technology for microgreen production because we like to. Most of the technology for vertical farming is focused on potted herbs, so there's not much providers of that kind of growing technology for microgreens, because there's some details that are different, and we have developed our own technology for that. The focus of our technology development has been on the cultivation environment, and especially the irrigation system of that. We're using the word precision irrigation technique for our irrigation technique. Most vertical farm technology use the ebb and flow irrigation, but we use those kind of growing trays and offer only the exact amount of water that they need every few days instead of flowing water. And because we are mainly farmers with really low R&D budget, our focus in our development has always been in being really cost efficient. As seen in the picture, that one of our earlier designs of our production shelves, the support structure is really cost efficient from outside of vertical farm industry, and that enables us to get some good cost savings. The current shelves that we use are first in first out shelves that offer us to have like production flow from the seedling phase to the harvesting phase through our production. We're currently operating at Keran Hallit, really close to Otaniemi. Yeah, but we have developed basically in our cultivation environment, most of the stuff we have developed ourselves from scratch, all from the electronics component of the control system to the software components. Also, we have wireless user interface that we use to control it, and the focus of our like control system is on precision. We can like do really precise control of, for example, irrigation to only few trays. Can get different irrigation that the trays next to them. So we can have like in our current production, we could have in few square meters, even like 10 different varieties if we would want, growing with different recipes, and we can control airflow also with the same accuracy. And yeah, currently we're not using, but we have also developed an interface with lightweight M2M protocol to have like interface for higher level control systems with IoT capabilities. But yeah, why are we focusing our own development in microgreens? There's two different details. First is the fact that the potted herbs technology already exists. There's plenty of players there. If we want to use that, we can buy it, like for example from Netlet. But for microgreens, there's not much available. But the other thing is that we believe microgreens to fit even better for vertical farming, and microgreen product, like usage of microgreens markets has been steadily growing, and we believe that it is currently in a phase where potted herbs were in the 80s or 90s, so like still a really small market, but it's soon going to start growing rapidly. And as we can see nowadays, potted herbs are like really basic thing that everyone buys from store, and we believe that microgreens can be at the same stage in 10 or 20 years. And these are a few of the reasons. They have higher vitamin and mineral content compared to the basic potted herbs, but especially in vertical farming, and especially in current times when the energy crisis is getting and winter is coming closer, these numbers are from our own production because we are doing both of them. The growing cycle for microgreens is much shorter because the microgreens, the phase of the plant that grows with the nutrition and the energy of the seed. So it basically the really initial phase of the plant, but it has really high nutrition density in my vitamin and minerals. And because it's really short cycles, it takes over 10 times less LED hours, and that results in big savings in energy consumption. And also because it doesn't have to be in a pot, the yield can be much higher per square meter, because we can use that kind of trays that have the plants like basically, you know, one big mat of sea of microgreens growing next to each other. And yeah, this is the reason we believe that microgreens are going to take some market from the other herbs. When people like find out that like it's a little bit healthier, and I think like if energy prices continue to rise up, it will be in the like price of the end produce. We will see also the differences of the growing cycle. But yeah, there's some like different aspects like of vertical farming microgreens compared to potted herbs. As I know that the shorter growing cycle is the like key issue, like key difference, and it also affects really much like the whole production, like the importance of automation in the whole production cycle of like sowing and harvesting and packing. All that becomes much more important, because if the plants are only for a few days under the light, it means that there's like the production is shooting out produce like every other day. So there has to be a lot of employees or really good machinery to handle that quick flow of produce through the production. But also it offers really good possibilities, because we have so many harvests during the year. So if we have for example, some AI application, we can get a good amount of data, really quick feedback, and do some optimization with this data, like really quick iteration, especially compared to like traditional farming, where you can get one like feedback once a year or perhaps twice a year. But now we can get like once a week from all the different growing trays. But yeah, speaking of growing the trays, that also makes some differences for the production technology. I stated about the different irrigation system. There could be some ways to do some ebb and flow irrigation system using the trays, but we have in our production we have found that being not so feasible. So we have built completely different irrigation system that applies water from the side and up straight to the tray, and have like few liters per tray every other day, and that makes we have to be able to control like big range of magnetic valves to be able to control precisely different growing cells that we have to control separately, and instead of having ebb and flow system where you basically might have only a pump and water the whole system at once. But instead of pots, when it comes to logistics and automation of logistics in production, using trays offers a good possibility, because we can use basically a traditional warehouse automation, because the growing trays are quite similar to like boxes that how can we can like move them with just basic conveyors, or use really similar to traditional automation in warehouses for lifting systems and stuff like that. And of course, with lower crops, may have lower levels and we can have more levels in our vertical farming system compared to having some a little bit higher crops like basil. And then there's some minor differences also regarding like the need of airflow. We have to have not only air conditioning, but we have to have the flow of air to make the plants grow strong and increase weight and stuff like that. But yeah, that was my presentation. Looking forward to hear your questions in panel. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Juuso. So our next presenter is Henri from Yield Systems, and I believe your title is business development, right?
Co-founder and yeah, mostly on the business side. Yes, great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So my name is Henri Jaatinen, one of the co-founders of Yield Systems. We are a spin-out company of Aalto University Research to Business projects. 2017, my co-founder Jussi Kilberg in the computer science department had a Business Finland funding for doing this TUTLI or Research to Business project. And he has been studying quite a lot of using of AI and machine learning technologies in plants or in generally in agriculture. And this is what we are doing at the moment. We were founded 2018 and then we had a minor COVID hit, but here we still are. So we are using machine vision and other technologies in food. So this is our motivating problem quite nicely. Nico laid out the whole thing so that we will only for the compensating the population growth in 2050. That's only how many 30 seasons away, so quite close there. So we will need to increase food production 60%, and then we need to compensate also the climate change, extreme weathers and such things, drought, too much water, too cold, and so forth. So it's a bit of a tall order actually globally. How do we do this? And definitely vertical farming is one technology to use. So we are using AI, and what is the limiting factor of AI is typically the data availability and accuracy, quantity, quality of data. So this was the key insight from our business to research, that we will need to innovate ways to actually produce data more efficiently than is currently available. So what we are doing, we are quite simply answering very straightforward questions that what are the plants like in the growth environment, on the field, in the vertical farm, wherever that happens. And this what the plants are like is called phenotype of the plant, so that here you can see the tree over there, there's a phenotype of that tree. And the phenotype is always a result from the genetics and the environment and the management, how the plant is then handled. So here you can see the picture. Typically I have a video, but I was not sure for the broadcasting reasons whether they run or not. But you can see in the pictures there are blue marks on the slide, and they are machine vision has identified them as spikes. So we basically count spikes, leaves, stems, whatever, any kind of a trait of the plant with machine vision. And spikes and grains especially tend to correlate quite well with, for example, with yield. So that when we can count how many spikes, how many seeds there is, then we can estimate that this is the yield from this field. So quite simple question, but difficult to execute actually. So we have been developing scalable, cost-efficient machine vision and analytics. So we are using, for example, mobile phone to actually collect the data. One of the curiosities of the agriculture is that nowhere globally there is money in this field, even though that our livelihood depends on the production of different things. There's typically very thin margins and no money. So we are using, we've solved the problem so that we are using mobile phones, which is a global platform for data collection, and try to algorithmically then do the rest of the things. We are using also satellite information, basically perhaps drones. What happened now? or any other kind of a data, but really that what are the plants like on the field is a key bottleneck, because that information is now missing, and that needs to happen every year. So will there be food this year is also a good question. It turns out that this phenotypic "what are the plants like" question has several applications, and I will now focus on two of them: plant breeding and combining that with vertical farming. So the plant breeding has mostly been focused on breeding plants for outdoor growth environments, because the scales are so massive, and in the future most of our food will still come from outdoors, so that the breeding has been focused on there. But there is a good opportunity to actually breed plants specifically for vertical farming, for example. That might be a good opportunity. The other thing in plant breeding has been that the plants have been breeded in the relative stable outdoor growth conditions, and this is not what we are seeing at the moment in Europe or in Argentina, or unfortunate war in Ukraine can also impact on these kind of things. And we have been focusing on very few plants, so it's staggering that 60% of all calories and proteins that we obtain, they really come from 3 different plants: rice, maize, and wheat. So when we have the climate risks, extreme weather conditions, and then we have very narrow genetical base for the calories that we are producing, then I think that we have quite a big risk globally here. So imagine now that there's war, and then if there would be some kind of a wheat disease globally, and we would be losing, let's say, 80% of wheat production in a year, and that would be a disaster. So it's very fragile and risky system at the moment what we are. I don't know why it's so, but it is so. So the question is that how can we speed up breeding of totally new plants on a commercial scale, industrial scale, and more diverse varieties, climate resilient varieties. And one of the things what we can do tackling in this problem is combining now the vertical. The guy in the picture seems pretty familiar. So combining physical growth environments, vertical farms, and then what we are using simulations in the virtual world. So using synthetic data, game engines, simulating different kinds of growth environments, be it drought or rain or even lightning conditions, what we have been discussing with Arttu. So that simulating all that will give us such a data that we can actually observe the plants, what do they look like. Otherwise, obtaining this kind of a training data would be impossible. The plants are so varied, the conditions are so varied, lightning conditions are so varied, that we simply don't have time and money to collect the training data from the real world. And luckily we have now the simulation capabilities, and they are developing quite fast. For example, Tesla is using our methods, let's say so. Okay, joke aside. But what could be what we have been trying to do and willing to do here in this trade of vertical farming and plant breeding, that the current paradigm, it's not that black and white, but the current paradigm is that we make tests. We make tests outdoors, and then we wait and test, and this takes years, like 5 to 10 years to develop a new variety. Instead, we could be doing simulations in different kind of vertical farms or controlled environments, using AI to observe how the simulations are going, and then test in the real world and observing them again, that how do they perform against the simulations and so forth, and really drastically reduce the time to market or time to field, so that we would have more plants, climate resilient plants. And this is something that we have been collaborating now with Luke, Titta, and Arttu, and other Helsinki University people. Also Metropolia is I see here presented, so that we are developing these kind of smart experiments and different kind of things that how do we can maximally utilize AI in this kind of plant breeding and other plant related topics. So we say there are a lot of opportunities, because if you want to design let's say a vertical farm around AI, it would be a bit different looking than it currently possible. So these are the things that we are doing and researching in the vertical farm side. And yeah, to close, we are one company participating in this kind of multidisciplinary cooperation environment. We are waiting for the funding decision. Titta is, I believe, heading the initiative to build a totally new kind of vertical farm here in Otaniemi with different kinds of modules for simulations and for testing out lighting or irrigation or whatever there is needed. And yeah, hopefully we can get this project forward and then we can start really developing simulations and AI for the better planet. Thank you.
Yes.
So now we
Thank
need to
you.
switch.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harri. Our next speaker comes online from Rovaniemi. He's Henri Jaatinen, crop specialist at Novarbo.
Let me see. Yeah.
So hold on just a sec, that we'll get
So
Henri online.
can you hear me?
Connected and showing presentation.
Recording in progress.
So can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, nice. So thanks for the introduction. All right, so greetings from Rovaniemi, and thank you for the whole working group for inviting me here. Being the last one, there must be some repetition or overlap with the previous speakers, but I try to skip those, and I hope that I can bring some valuable information to the table. I'm Henri Jaatinen, and I work as a cultivation specialist at Novarbo. And today I want to speak to you about the food production side of our industry. Okay, so Novarbo was founded in 2007. We've been providing substrates and organic fertilizers for professionals. One new interesting thing is wood-based substrates. We have a new biofiber facility up and running, and we will be manufacturing peat-free substrates next year. We also provide CEA technology. One thing is our heat reuse system that enables a closed environment for greenhouses and vertical farms. Our vertical farms go from fully automated turnkey solutions to container farms that are mainly for research and education purposes. Our R&D facility was built in 2018, and now for 4 years we've been doing our R&D work there. We have a portfolio for over 20 most popular leafy greens, and we aim to match the customer's needs in our solutions with regards to the size and level of automation. We can refine the business models to make our clients flourish, and we have a high expertise in the industrial symbiosis. So this is a bit controversial question, but can vertical farming really feed the world? Is it food or just a side dish? Mainly leafy greens are applicable at the moment. Berries, as far as I know, are not yet economically viable and so-called basic lettuce like loose leaf lettuce, crisp-head lettuce, and others are produced in large quantities. But like your Matta said, I think that there's we should prefer more nutritious plants. There are fast-growing cabbages, for example, like kale, that contain a lot of more vitamins, minerals, and fiber that could be more better for human health. Here's some challenges about vertical farming. One thing is that we are often competing with greenhouses, as for Finland, and producing like same crops with similar price, and the justification for the premium price might be a bit hard sometimes, because, for example, in Japan, people really want to pay more for ultra clean lettuce, but maybe it's not the same thing here in Finland. So how do we differentiate from greenhouses with really authenticated sustainability? That needs some LCA and other things like that Natural Resources Institute of Finland is doing, and VTT. And for example, Association for Vertical Farming is doing work right now to create this kind of sustainability certification for vertical farms that could really be useful for this industry. Also, consumer communication is critical, because not everyone knows what this is all about, and is it really sustainable, and so on. Also, utilization of different kinds of industrial symbiosis to reduce the operational expenses and to really improve the sustainability can be a bit challenging sometimes. More challenges. Finnish modern greenhouses are super efficient. The greenhouse producers are famous for their high yield, for example, with cucumber. Also, the support policy kind of maintains these old structures, and there might be some heavy restrictions to introduce new crops when it comes to the financial support side. Also, building a truly sustainable vertical farm is it really demands a multidisciplinary company. There's a lot of engineering with the building, the structures, automation, and also the HVAC systems. When it comes to cultivation, you should never kind of forget the plant when you are designing the farm. Here's a list of the main advantages. I think most of you are very familiar with this, but the most significant ones are the high productivity year-round, resource use efficiency, and we are protected from the extreme weather that is super important, especially in the future. So we are going towards mainstreaming, but there's a lot of technical development to be done. And Hannu told about AI, but it still needs development to when you gather all the data. The AI can really help us to combine all of the different growth factors and really to improve the production as a whole. Also, new spectrums are important. A lot of LED lighting research is done, and it's not always the LED fixture efficiency that is the thing that brings you the best yield. It's also if you want kilos per square meters or best quality, you need to be real careful with the spectrum. Also, strategies to reduce the capital expenses can be done by smart design of the farm, where you put it, how you build it, and operational expenses as well. Can you really make good use out of the side streams? And can you, for example, sell the surplus energy to the district heating system, for example? What Titta and others are doing, we need new protein and energy-rich crops to CEA in greenhouses and vertical farms. A lot of breeding to be done. And also genetic modification should be made available everywhere to get this whole CEA industry forward, and agriculture as a whole. Vegetable and forest seedlings are a big thing that improve the overall productivity of our food systems. Medicinal plants like cannabis and biofarming, where you make the plants to produce you with novel compounds and molecules, is one big thing. Also, it might make sense to increase the diversification or resilience and self-sufficiency of our food systems. And one thing you can do is upgrade the capacity of our modern greenhouses by combining them with vertical farms, with the seedling production. Possible solutions to accelerate the CEA from Food Without Fields done by VTT and Natural Resources Institute of Finland says that one thing is supporting the sustainable production even more. Education and know-how is one big thing. There's a picture on the right from our cultivation container that we built to Gradia Jämsä earlier this year, and they are training the future horticulturists there. Investment subsidies is one really big thing that could make this industry move to the next level in Finland. Maybe the long-term regime change in the whole production structure could use some optimization, like the new crops, protein crops, energy-rich crops that Ditta and others are doing. Maybe there's also some optimization with the different PPFD demands between the crops. Some crops need more light, some needs very little. So maybe it's a good thing to put the right crops to the right production systems. But yeah, I think vertical farming can really support feeding the world. There's these industrial symbioses that increase the circular economy. For example, our heat reuse system uses the excess heat maybe to the neighboring building or straight to the district heating network. One thing that Arttu told us about is the electricity, and vertical farming is a really good solution for the demand side management, where we can use the electricity on the hours when the demand is really low. Also, streamlining of the whole food production. I think that vertical farms can play a significant role in there. Our fruitful fields are declining. Some crops need to go to the greenhouses, and there's optimization, like what plants to be in greenhouse, what plants go to the vertical farms. Also, disease-free seedlings are a big thing. They can be produced in vertical farms and moved to greenhouses, seasonal high tunnels, open field, and also reforestation projects that are super important. So yeah, I think vertical farming can support feeding the world, because we can also make food where it's impossible in the traditional ways. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okei. Sori, teidän pitääkin liikkua tähän ilmeisesti tähän kahden. Tämä on parempi feng shui. Istukaa.
Joo, istukaa.
Pari tuolia tällä puolella. Taitaa takana. Se ei haittaa.
Niin, suorassa.
I hope you can hear us in the online. Do you think possibly we're close enough?
Well, just a little bit higher.
So yeah, thank you everyone for the presentation. It was really interesting stuff, and you could really see the multidisciplinarity in this field of vertical farming, that there are so many different ideas from different sectors, and I think that's one of the main things why this whole industry is so interesting. And now for the next stage, our idea is to ask these panelists a couple of questions. So it's going to be very relaxed. You can put your speculation hat on, so you don't need to base everything on numbers, because we're going to ask you about making projections for the next 20 to 30 years. So obviously there is a lot of room for speculation. And maybe we would like to start with the question of the electricity price, because it is something that everybody is talking right now due to the war in Ukraine and also some supply policy related problems. We have seen a very steep rise in the price of electricity and also heat. And as Nico said, in the UK, a big amount of greenhouse growers are not going to grow during the next winter because it's just too expensive. And in the Finnish media, it has been told that maybe up to 50% of the Finnish greenhouse growers might also need to skip the next winter season. So of course, this means that there will be a big shortage of local food in the coming winter. And maybe now for the panelists, my question is that it's of course very bad for the whole greenhouse industry, the rising electricity prices, but also of course vertical farms are also using electricity to provide the LED lamps. So maybe I could start by asking Nico, how do you see this rising electricity prices in Europe in relation to vertical farming in short run and also in long run?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to correct first that 60 hectares is actually greenhouses demolished. So they are not going to continue growing ever again.
Okay.
Because they get better price for selling real estate instead of that area to real estate, instead of waiting for another year and maybe somebody's paying enough money for the queues. But anyways, going back to the electricity price thinking, so a lot of energy specialists are saying that in long term energy is definitely going to get cheaper and cheaper. Eventually it's going to be ridiculously cheap. What we are seeing right now is temporary disruptions of energy infrastructure, meaning that markets are taking their time to adjust into these changes. And one good example is the raw material prices, what we are monitoring closely because we are using a lot of aluminum and this sort of stuff in our vertical farms. In April, we did a quotations for clients, and we checked that aluminum price was 3,500 euros per ton. And 1 month later, when we are revising those quotations, it was 2,500 euros per ton. So it means that originally the kauppasaarto of the Russia meant that aluminum didn't flow to European market and global markets, and it took 1 month to actually find another route back to the global markets, and then it fixed the prices. So what we are going to see in electricity is more or less something like that new ways of let's say rearranging the markets is taking place, and the futures are saying that next summer we are back to 4 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, and do you also feel that there could be some kind of a creative disruption now that if the greenhouse growers are going bankrupt now during this winter, there will be a lot less supply on the local food side? So do you see this as an opportunity for the vertical farming market?
Well, I think that the greenhouses are fast to adapt to this situation because they can just shut down the operation, and there's very little costs when you shut down greenhouse and wait for the next year. But I think the biggest question is whether the retail and the consumer market can actually wait for that long. And this is probably driving the retailers to look for and even incentivize ways to produce where they can actually guarantee long-term the supply of those products. And this could actually be the biggest, let's say, impact on vertical farming and expanding the vertical farming business.
Yeah, and if anybody else wants to comment from the panel, you can just jump in whenever you want. Maybe Juuso, because you are selling to the consumers, do you feel like if we get a little bit of shortage in the food supply during this next winter? Do you think the prices will hike in the vegetable section? Do you think there is room to go even higher than it already is in Finland?
Yeah, I think to be honest, the energy crisis gives us at Pino a good opportunity, because like we are working mainly on a category that is a little bit unfamiliar for people, and if there's less supply to other categories, it definitely will give an opportunity to us, because perhaps consumers are then looking for different alternatives. Yeah.
I would like a follow-up question, that what are your thoughts on, for example, from consumer side, there has been on the media that these Optivatti and companies like that have been developing, like for 10 years or so, developing these systems to automate the consumption according to the peak hours and away from those peak hours. And I was just reading about that it's something that has been slow to start because the electricity has been so cheap. But what you see in sort of like in the context of vertical farming, growing plants, these type of systems to control the electricity prices, just from the technological side of you, do you use them? Do you offer them? And Nico and Juuso, how do you see this?
Yeah, we are still farming in such a small volumes that for us the infrastructure is the biggest expense. So we have actually kind of scheduled our consumption of electricity, so it's basically all the time the same, because the plants want kind of continuous day cycle. It cannot be like 1 hour off, 1 hour on the lights, and it has to be some like depending on the variety of the crop, it's like 10 hours to 14 or even to 18 or something like that, but it's one continuous, and we have schedules and them so that the capacity of our electricity, like wires, are all time used properly, so we don't have actually so much fluctuation in our production.
Yeah, and Arttu, I remember you telling about your adventures of finding the dimming system for your experiments. If you can share a bit about that, how did it go? Because one would imagine that, like we've been discussing, that we've been to the moon decades ago, that something like this would be like super simple and you could have 50 different providers and you can choose from, but you didn't have such a straightforward experience.
Yeah, it was a surprisingly long hours of Googling I had to spend to find actually a product which is capable of kind of like introducing like these kind of like automated lighting regime programs. You can have like simple ramp up and ramp down timers, but that's basically it. But there's only a handful of companies which actually have those kind of products, which you can actually program different changes throughout the photo period into your lighting regime. But yeah, eventually I did find one product, and like I'm happy that I can actually use it in my PhD project. So
So how about Nico, your insights from your perspective?
We actually did a pilot project with Fortum maybe 2-3 years back, where we connected our own R&D farm into this active in-grid trading. Mainly it wasn't because of the high prices or low prices, but this fast frequency compensation trading. And this because the greenhouses, they can only react in 15 minutes. You cannot just shut them down and instantly just turn them back on. You will burn the lamps. But with LEDs, you can actually go every second down and up and down and up. And it doesn't mean that we have to go all the way down. It's just we go with 10% down, we go 15% down, and then we recover from there. And we did that. And during the pilot project, it was actually actively controlled by the actual trading, automatic trading of those instruments. But because the electricity price is so low and these other reasons, infrastructure price and all of these things, there's a lot of other things that needs to be prioritized before these can be implemented and actually get some meaningful, let's say, upside of those. But now when the price is up, there is definitely significant amount of savings that can be done both on lighting during the cheap hours, but also compensating these frequency changes on the grid.
So basically the grid pays you to kind of lower your intensity when there is a high demand on the...
So it means that if the frequency goes down 0.1 hertz, then there is this emergency, let's say, practices taken in place. And if you give your electricity load into that reserve, that it can actually be turned down automatically with certain, let's say, proof rates, then the FinGrid is actually paying you money to be in that reserve. And it doesn't matter if they use your load or not, but they are still paying you to be in that reserve. And the good thing about LEDs is that you can actually go in that really fast phase. And back when we did that research or testing, the price they paid was about 23 cents, sorry, 2.5 cents or so per kilowatt hour, meaning that we are actually getting half back from the electricity price that we are buying.
Great, thank you. We can continue if ideas follow later, but considering the time, and we have a list of very nice questions, and we also might have there in the chat, but I would like to continue about this species and variety discussion that is like it's nowadays it's lettuce and herbs, and we've heard that microgreens. So what's the next step? Nico touched upon that, there's a lot of pharmaceutical plants and strawberries and whatnot, but you mentioned the big thing is animal feed. I remember, was it a year ago already or something, I saw the news from Ohio that they were actually indeed in vertical farming, growing basically grass to cows, wasn't it? So you really, because I thought that your point was quite surprising that that's going to be the big thing.
I say that that's going to be one of the big things, definitely. So, but Timo Oksanen, I don't know if you know Timo Oksanen from Kangasala. So he actually grew fodder in the 70s with mercury lamps already in his cow house. So it's not a new thing, definitely, but it's going to be big because those huge areas in Ohio, I think that's the biggest place where they have big issues with lack of water, and most of that water is used to grow that fodder. So if they have 350,000 heads in that one ranch, and they cannot have that fodder grown locally because the groundwater is dropping fast, so then they don't have any options but take down the amount of heads, and then there's not going to be supply of those. And the problem is that to actually recover from 1 year cut down of production of that cattle, it takes several years to actually recover back to the old level. So it's going to be a long-term impact on the supply chains.
Yeah, this I think is quite important point in that sense that in agriculture and plants in general, it's not like switching on and off. But once you reach the point that some area, particular area, somewhat even partly collapses or has a significant disturbance, it's not that like ramping up next year would be normal, but it can take really five years. I don't know, maybe there's another drought, and then you have dusty soil and everything. And once those systems then start to collapse, they are not coming back because there's no water and anything like that. So it's irreversible in that sense. We've seen now that there are local disturbances and not yet irreversible changes. But for example, in Australia, there was a cattle died in millions, I believe it was, due to coldness. It was raining so heavily and windy, then the cows and they practically froze on the fields. So these kind of extreme weather conditions, they are not coming back, and socially and economically and psychologically for the farmers and the producers, it's really damaging. They are not going to cover from that. They go bankrupt, and who's going to take over that business and so forth. So this is I think that the really important point to understand that these are not kind of you go to supermarket and let me buy a production site. It's not like that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and of course it's related to all agricultural production and vertical farming about the species and varieties. It's also like depending on the geographical location, what is interesting, what is possible, and all the, for example, this cow feed example, that from Finland's perspective, that seems just very far-fetched idea, but like we just heard, it might very well make sense somewhere else. And like we heard that in Japan, they really prefer like clean products, and all that. So the perspectives and consumer preferences are different also. But what about going a bit back from the animal feed side, pharmaceutical plants? I've once learned that the medicinal plants, I've once learned that there are about 18,000 different plant species used for producing different types of medicines, and 2/3 of those plants are collected from the wild. They are not even grown in the fields, but they are just, collected. So one can imagine all the hurdles with the climate change, and so to secure that supply, do you think there must be an opportunity, and it would be like high value crops, so to say, also to produce in? Is there anything going on in Finland, in Europe?
We have something, not in Finland, but it's illegal here. But in the more civilized world, for medical marijuana is really a big business, truly, and other medicinal plants. Definitely, there's room for that. Breeding them in suitable for plant vertical farms, definitely a big opportunity, I would say. Like you said, that they are simply collected out of the nature, but you could then breed different plants to specific, having specific traits, like maximizing the medical part of it and minimizing other things and so forth. And there comes into play all the lighting conditions and everything like that, so that you get the recipes right.
Yeah.
But definitely an opportunity.
And how about Netle as a technology provider? Have you had requests?
We actually have a client who is producing extracts for medical industry, not that crop, a different crop. And this is what I want to emphasize, that there are, like you said, thousands of plants that are used in, not necessarily the hardcore medical, but more of this natural medicine field, like Chinese medicine, all these fields. And the consumption is huge and the demand is huge. And what we see is that the extracts that we can actually produce in vertical farms, the quality is at least 3 to 4 times better than what you can actually collect from nature or what you can grow in greenhouses. So this is probably one of the biggest things that we need to understand also here, is that there are so much more things we can do with vertical farming than just lettuce or herbs or even food. And the value of these, for example, my sister has a horse, and they are selling herb assortments for horses for medical purposes, for curing some certain, I don't know anything about horses. But anyways, she said that they are selling these few grams of herbs, perfectly normal herbs, and it costs like 30 euros a bag. So there's huge amount of business opportunity all around this field if you just open our eyes a little bit beyond this narrow, currently big vertical farming field of lettuce and herb production.
Yeah.
One quite interesting example, I think, from last year was from Middle East. I think it was from Iran, where they have grown saffron plants in vertical farming systems. And as you may know, saffron and the spice used in food and also I think in medicine in some parts is like extremely expensive is to produce and also to collect and harvest. So that is a kind of like alternative approach of like producing different plants in vertical farming systems.
Sure.
And also a lot of these plants are endangered by the climate change. So it might be the only option to grow them in vertical farms in the coming years.
Yeah, and I think that there's also this kind of a mindset shift needs to happen, so that in these cases the artificial is much better than the organic or natural or whatever you want to call that. And perhaps the artificial is also many times more environmentally friendly and everything than the traditional ways of doing something like saffron or anything like that. So also mines is for some reason people tend to think that organic or natural is somewhat better or more authentic or whatever kind of things, where the numbers are saying that no, the artificial way is much better.
I think just today I noticed an article on LinkedIn stating that the US Department of Agriculture has stated that vertical farming produce can be labeled as organic produce.
Okay.
Really? So,
Yeah, there, not in Europe.
not in Europe, no. So only US.
Well, they say pizzas are vegetables, so.
How about you, Juuso, do you have any like wild dreams of coming up with new plant species for your technology?
Yeah, I think for us definitely like widening our like perspective, what is the possibilities is something that we perhaps need to step up in. But we are because we are like have already customers, so we have to like keep producing the stuff, but like expand some other start testing with. I think for us it has been mainly some jokes about growing some wine or like there was it has been mainly just company inside jokes and different varieties, but perhaps we should start taking this more seriously.
And I think that Kotipizza promised that if somebody will grow pineapple in Finland, they will buy it for their pizza production. So everything local, yeah.
Pineapple it is.
Yeah, maybe we move on a little bit about the future of the markets and the economy. So Nico already touched this a little bit by saying that maybe in the next 10 years, vertical farming will not take over and it will be more maybe of a niche market, still producing this kind of a couple specified plants that are really efficient to produce in a vertical farm. But how do you feel in a little bit of longer run, let's say 20, 30 years, by 2015, do you think we can still cut down the investment cost by quite a lot by maybe applying economies of scale or by new kind of innovations? Like, let's say if nowadays some automated system is 1,000 euros per cultivation square meter, do you think there's a lot of room in the future to kind of reduce the kind of investment cost?
Honestly, I don't think the investment cost is big player in the whole picture. So the OPEX is the most significant one there. So it makes sense to pay a little bit more of the equipment if the OPEX is actually better. And if the OPEX is a little bit better, then you're making more money every year than if you just pay a little bit less for the technology and then you pay more every year because of that lower level of technology. But coming back to that economy of scale, so it's very difficult right now to say what is future going to look like because, well, nobody expected this war and everything taking place here. But if we think that, let's put it this way, if food price is climbing, and first of all, if we are saying that food price is now, I don't know, 10% higher than what it was a year ago, equivalent food basket, and what we are seeing right now is that the food price rise that we see right now is actually because of the problems in supply chains last year. And now we see huge issues in supply chain this year, but this is going to affect food prices on next year. And this is going to be horrible situation if now we are in 10% and we have barely, of course, we have issues last year, but nothing compared to this year. So it's going to be really horrific how much food is going to cost next year. So coming back to this, what makes sense to grow in vertical farms, saying the market is going to be huge in these low nutritional value crops. And I think there's going to be lettuce and herbs, there's going to be cucumber, tomatoes, there's going to be maybe a little bit, there are interesting ways to grow potatoes and these a little bit higher, well, potatoes actually quite high on nutritional value, but a little bit higher nutritional value crops. So it is really hard to forecast what's going to happen. But if we hypothesized that electricity price is going to be extremely cheap in future, and we hypothesized that food price is going to be really high in future. So if food price is really is high enough and the electricity price is low enough, anything makes sense to grow in vertical farm.
Yeah, that's
Even the pineapples.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So now maybe a little bit even more speculation than so far. If you think about that 2050 scenarios, like what kind of like new innovations in the field of vertical farming, something that really doesn't exist yet? Have you heard like of any extremely interesting new stuff, like maybe utilizing lasers instead of LED lights? Or do you have high hopes for any kind of a really like game-breaking new innovations? How do you think AI can do it?
Yeah, partially AI can be part of many things. For example, robotics. Now it was I didn't if you watched, but there was the Tesla AI Day, and they announced a humanoid robot, so that I promised that will cost like below $20,000, and it can operate then the same things that humans would be doing. That is kind of a robots could be interesting in the vertical farms, that they would be operating the thing. It's surprisingly difficult to actually pick a berry or something like that. But definitely robotics, all kinds of automation, optimization. When the facility is built around the idea that it will be automated and optimized with an AI capabilities, I think that it will change somewhat the existing things, materials innovations, and that kind of things.
Yeah, and how about the OPEX side, Nico? You talked it being extremely important. Do you see that there could be some kind of a leap in technology in that sense, like maybe not going beyond LED lights or some other kind of application?
Well, usually the improvements in technology are gradual. And the challenge is that if we now introduce new way of doing something like lasers or something, it will take 5 years at least before we can implement those in the actual commercial farms. It's not that the technology doesn't work. We can actually prove pretty easily that it works, but the question is whether it works 10, 15 years that it should work, and the life cycle expenses are reasonable. So that we honestly don't know if we now introduce something and put €1 million into it and invest in the vertical farm with that technology, and then we find out after 5 years that it wasn't worth it. So that's why small scale it makes sense, but bigger scale it usually goes back to a little bit more conservative development in technology.
Yeah, definitely in all agtech, it's the scaling part is the difficult one. Really taking time quite a lot and proving that it really works on a global scale or even in a vertical farm scale. So that is, and the plants are part of the equation as well. So that we need to understand that they are also complex organisms that behave and react in specific ways. And it's not so that we just take something and put it in under the light and wonders happen, but it's really a complex operation to actually do it. So also I think that what can we have on the biology side of the plants, genetics and that kind of things also come out and nicely play out in the context of vertical farming.
Yeah, and I think Arto has an insight for this.
Yeah, touching about the plant part of the equation, which also Titta mentioned earlier, about like gaining insight from the plant's perspective, like what is their like natural rhythm of daily life, for example. I'm talking circadian rhythms. How can we observe the natural rhythms of the plant and match external conditions to meet those demands? For example, light and temperature rhythms. Plants, as similarly to humans, have like natural rhythms where we tend to wake up at the same time and go to sleep at the same time every day. And if we find ways to monitor those rhythms, we can actually match different adjustments to the systems much better than we do at the current level. if we manage to find those technical solutions for that. And also machine learning and image recognition and machine vision is going to most probably play a key role in that sense.
If we usually when we talk about big leaps in technology, it means that we have the biggest chunk of expenses in the way we are doing things, and then we have a significant cut on that expense, and then we actually make huge difference on the production expenses than the price of the end product. The vertical farming technology, well, of course, the technology itself is developing maybe towards a little cheaper once it develops more, and there's cheaper ways of actually doing things. The capex side, but then the opex side, it's very difficult to actually see any huge improvements. LEDs are pretty good nowadays with up to 70% efficiency ratings, so it's difficult to see huge leaps in LED side. Climate management, I think it is as good as it gets. Of course, gradual minor improvements happens all the time, but it's difficult to see any major things there. So if we are talking about this conventional ways of producing stuff, let's say conventional vertical farming ways of producing stuff, then I think the biggest leaps is going to come from these tens of millions of even hundreds of millions of dollars poured into this genetic development for vertical farm varieties. Because if we are already reaching the genetic maximum of certain varieties in vertical farms, probably we never get there, but let's say closely. So then it means that the biggest leap is going to be if we can actually get that energy efficiency from 5%. So now even if we give the best possible spectrum to the plants, we still get maybe 5% efficiency from light to biomass. So we have 95% still to achieve in that perspective, but that we can only do with genetic improvement. So that's going to be probably the biggest leap in future.
Yeah, and I think like what comes to leaps in technology, I think we are still, even though we have come a far way, we are still in the really initial phase of like vertical farming in general. So even with the gradual changes, like minor improvements here and there, because it's so multidisciplinary, so there's so many different parts of the system, the small changes in all of those will like make sure that the vertical farming field in general is going to like expand in all different directions. Like of course using AI might like offer big potential to optimize stuff, but like building towards non-food like markets and medicine and all that, like I think we're at the path that vertical farming is going to like, even though perhaps in the like calorie intake point of view it might not be in a big role in 10 years, but like in general the vertical farming is going to be everywhere in the like upcoming decades.
Yeah, now really the speculation hat on, but we really need to remember what Nico said, that the current plants, they are selected for specific production environments, mostly outdoors. We've been breeding them to outdoors and so forth, and we have not been breeding plants specifically for vertical farming to be so that computational biology and AI, Bayesian experimental design, there are a lot of new ways of actually try to accelerate evolution in that sense, so that breeding better plants specifically for vertical farming, and that's also the genetic side, but also the growth environment side, and what traits we want to focus on, like be it in the medical plants or nutrition values or something like that, and that the plants don't need to look like, for example, barley or whatever we would like to put their fava bean. They don't need to look like they look outside. They can be bigger, they can be thicker, and there's no environmental stress in that sense. That might be a problem for some plants because they need that environmental stress. But yeah, it would be really interesting to actually try to start breeding plants specifically for vertical farming. That might be a really interesting avenue. It's not the business yet, but
well, I think it is because Syngenta
Syngenta
and Temasek, they invested $40 million just in a company that is purely focusing on developing vertical farming.
Yes,
breeds.
so let's talk.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we have kind of reached our time limit. It was really interesting, but let's take some questions first. Maybe, Pasi, you can check the online questions, but we can start from the audience if anybody has a question. Mari.
Kiitos. I'm Maria Korppi, also from BIS, working with these guys. And I was quite interested about your presentation, Aalto. So first you had this point that you could get 20 to 30% energy savings. So I guess that was the assumption that you buy directly from the grid.
Yes.
Then I was thinking, what if you would integrate some kind of energy storage? I guess you could even level up the savings. And quite a bit looking at the electricity price graphs that you showed.
I suppose, yeah. If there's such like storage capacity for this kind of like electricity storage, it's quite a substantive amount of electricity which needs to be stored, depending on the scale of the production facility, of course. But I'm not really like a specialist on battery technology, so and like energy storage technologies, so I don't really have a good take on that, I'm afraid.
Something positive still, and maybe to everyone. I was thinking I could use the field.
Yeah.
And then that's a question. I have a second one for you.
Yeah, continue.
So these graphs of the intensity versus time and quite different profiles there. And then the end result was that there was actually no difference for the lattice. But then I now quickly made my integrals right. It looked like the total energy delivered to the plant was the same in each case.
Yes.
So then maybe comes the question that what if you now start pulsating the light? And how big pulses could you make? And in the end, it boils down to what you were talking about, that what is actually the interaction of the light with the plant, and every interaction has some interaction time. So maybe you could switch off the light. I don't know, I'm just taking ideas at some point to save even more electricity, or you could have a DC component and then pulsate on top of that.
Some studies on kind of like rapid pulsation of light, specifically for saving electricity, have been conducted already, and they have gone down to like hertz level pulsation as well, and that can actually also save a few percent of electricity as well. But you're kind of like going into the point of my study actually. So we are trying to determine what is the extent of this tolerance, how much we can influence the light environment, especially in terms of light intensity, without disrupting the plant growth and development in the long term.
Yeah, because I can tell you from experience, if you just apply according to the electricity price, the plants go boink. So, that won't work.
So there's some limit to it, at least.
In the simplest case, you have the spectrum, like you said, but then you have also the amplitude, and then you have the frequency, not of the light, but at which you apply it. And then if you vary these two, I guess you could hopefully gain quite a lot of info to then save the energy.
Yes. There's also well, we can go to the next question.
Maybe after studies we'll answer these questions.
Yeah, two rapidly answer from me.
So when is my Christmas?
Let's go to the next one.
Okay, I'll start with some very quickly. I have a question. Maybe I missed out. Have you tried different wavelengths for this light? Because I think for LED that can be an option.
It's readily
really need visible light to.
Yeah, they're really readily adjustable. We have one spectrum we're currently using is specified for biomass production in plants, like producing leafy greens basically. And we have another set of these lights, which is with another spectrum, which is kind of like corresponding to a white light we see on the with our human eyes, and it's like corresponding to sunlight basically. So we have two different spectra we aim to try, and there's other options we can also try out. But also there's options to. Sorry?
Was there any difference between?
We haven't gotten to that stage yet. But yeah, in the future we surely test out different spectra as well.
Instead of lasers, that can be perfect.
That's maybe not part of my PhD project, but maybe in the summer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We have a few questions online. So one first is for Nico. There is a question: are you running the farms, or are you just concentrating to providing the technology for the farms?
We are running our own farm, so we have about 150 square meter R&D farm in Pirkkala. So we are running that farm ourselves, and we are selling the crops or the produce to Pirkanmaan osuuskauppa mainly and some city markets. But our business itself is to sell technology and some ramp up operations for those farms. But the main business and the main core is to sell technology.
Thank you. And the second question is about the microgreens. How long do microgreens keep? How long are the microgreens?
All right. It depends on the variety of the crop. Pea microgreens are the longest, they're like 15 to 10 centimeters, but the lowest radish is less than 10 centimeters. It's like 5 to 8 centimeters, so they're quite short.
No more questions online?
Okay, then I think
Yeah, we're right on time.
Right.
Quite good. Yeah. I would like to thank everybody in the audience and in the panel and Peter for this event. And I think it was some really interesting discussion and so many different topics. And it really feels like we all believe that vertical farming will have an impact on the future. And it looks like we are on the right path to growing this industry and making new applications for all kinds of different products. So yeah, I think this was it for this event. So
yeah,
thank you again, and
thank you.
it was really nice having you here.
Thank you.
Joo. Teidän tekemistä tosiaan nyt ei ole niin vähän aikaa ollut vertikaalista, mutta on varmaan hyvä, että ei pidetty sieltä paljon.
Tästä voi valita. Kyllä meni.
Firman pikkujoulut.
Maistaako olla?
Vitsi ei kuulla sitä, mä en oikein tunne ketään.
Se on meemi.